that, we are live, and hello everybody. Welcome on in. Love to see the excitement already. Happy Chinese New Year for those celebrating as well. Or whatever you happen to be going on in the world, whether you're off for President's Day or some other holiday, you're celebrating Chinese New Year. Happy that you're here. Hello. Welcome on in. So super excited for y'all to be here. Hi. Let's go ahead and get the logistical kind of start things out of the way. So if you are looking for your MLH swag points and other important pertinent information, you're going to find your check-in link right at the bottom, directly below my face at the moment. I should be pointing to it right now. There you go. Beautiful. So you can find my lovely link right on below my head. You can also scan the QR code in the top left-hand corner to check in. I'll leave the QR code up for the remainder of the stream. It usually doesn't block too much, but I will go ahead and remove that check-in banner in just a minute or two. A couple of things before we get started. First of all, apologies if you can hear my dog munching in the background. I just gave him dinner. First of all. Second of all, if you did not go ahead and get a chance to check in, make sure you go ahead and do that. Hello, welcome on in. And then otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started in just a minute or two. I'll share my screen. I'm gonna keep this link on here for just another second. How can we get the background image? Oh, the MLH background that I have. I will see if it's not somewhere on our website. I'll have to go look. I'll have to go digging for it. I've used it for so long at this point, I don't even remember where it's from, but I'll go ahead and ask and figure out if I can get an answer for you, probably before tomorrow. Let's see here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn this one off here. Hi, I'm Kari. You can see my name now. There it is. Beautiful. And that is a great segue into our first question. What is this lovely topic and what are we going to learn? So the lovely topic of my stream, as you might have seen by the title if you clicked in here, I called this lovely stream Data to Dashboard. And the idea behind it is that we're going to go ahead and take a little data set. Well, it's not so little, but a data set that I've created, and go ahead and turn it into a dashboard for us to display some sort of information about our users, and generally help you explore some cool technologies, maybe learn about some new things that you might be interested in trying out, and generally, right, kind of give you an introduction on how to get some, like some data analysis, data science tools in here, alongside a mixture of also getting you some development skills in Python. So that's going to be the main covers. Yes, there'll be pandas. But it'll be pretty like a good mix of, some data analysis, some like data set cleaning. I have the data set. Oh, there goes my dog. I have the data set already, but it may not, I'll go ahead and see if I can post it up on GitHub or something similar, so that everybody has access. Oh my goodness, you can see my dog's tail on the edge of the background. Hi, Todd. That's funny. Buddy, just go to bed. Bedtime for you. Anyway, DigitalOcean, not planning on it. I kind of came up with this idea a couple of moments prior. So that's going to be our main focus on there. So as you can see, I kind of just went ahead and span up my Visual Studio Code instance. This is what I'll be using to code in today. Primarily, we're going to be working with Python, so feel free to use a different editor like PyCharm or something similar, or, whatever works best for you. You'll probably want to use something with, a dedicated file structure and a file directory. So probably not something like a Jupyter notebook. I would recommend setting up, a full repository, and going from there. Yes, my dog is very cute. He is now off to the races. And by the races, I mean, he's going to get a toy, like the legend he is. And hello, welcome on in. So let's go ahead and I'm going to start a new file in here. So I'm going to open up my repository. I'm just going to go straight into let's put it in my documents folder in here. And I will place it in here. We'll just make a new repository, and I'm going to call this a lovely project, my student dashboard. And we'll go ahead and open it up. Hello, welcome on in, everybody. Happy to see you all. And so right in here, all that I've gotten started with is a blank, completely blank file, right? Or not even file, completely blank folder. We're going to close C-line here. We won't meet her for a little bit. Completely blank folder, right? With pretty much nothing else in it, just kind of to help us get set up. I've got a couple things in here, right? Like my GitHub Copilot chat and all of my lovely little extensions installed from various things I've had to dabble with, right? Feel free to use any of these you might need for whatever. All right, looks like I've got a couple of different questions here. I don't know what I'm clicking, but generally, right, so I do have some extra Python things added in here to make my Python life easier. I won't go over my full setup, of course, but feel free to ask me questions if you notice something that I have that you don't. Let me go ahead and start by setting up kind of the intro, well, structure of our lovely repository. So in here, we're going to need a couple of things. We're going to need a data folder, and we're going to need a source folder. And then last but certainly not least, that is pretty much it. We are also going to create two files to start. We're going to create a requirements.txt, and we're going to create a readme.md. Okay, so just in case you're not familiar, I'll go ahead and take it kind of beginner friendly for now. If you want me to explain anything, start over, add on, or whatever else, feel free. I want to kind of hear your input and your interactivity and your, like your thoughts and questions throughout this week. So, or throughout the stream. So feel free to stop me if you have anything and you're like, I'm not sure what this means or something similar. Totally just let me know. I'm also going to turn my on. Sweet. Okay. So I have went ahead and literally just set up two folders and a README to start. So our first step in here is going to be to install some of our dependencies. So this will set up some of the Python packages we are going to need. I'll go ahead and also let you know, we're going to take some time to also set up a couple of files in here, as well as add our data set to our data folder. We will be using GitHub here, so we will be creating a Git repository in here, and I'll walk you through the setup of that in a second as well. But before we do that, I want to get our dependencies set up, and then I will go ahead and start there. So for our dependencies today, we're going to need, like our lovely commenter mentioned, pandas. We're also going to use NumPy. We're going to use Plotly. And we'll use Streamlit to actually create our data visualizations, right? Those will be the four dependencies that we actually need. And then for my install, I'm going to go ahead and open up a new terminal window in here. And then for my terminal window, all I'm going to do is run my lovely, I don't want to ask about commands. No, my bad. Let's try that again. And open chat is command I. Got it. I'm just going to start by running pip install -r requirements.txt, right? So all that I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, right, Python, right, install the packages listed in requirements.txt. All right, it's going to ask me in here whether I want to create a virtual environment. I'm going to select yes. I'm going to select my most recent version to download it, and I'm also going to select the dependencies. This sets up a virtual environment, right? As that warning said, this just makes sure that I don't mess with any of the Python versions or packages installed locally on my machine. And you can, there are benefits or drawbacks to completing this in the virtual environment. In my case, right, we're just setting this up for the purposes of the stream. We'll generally benefit from having it set up in a nice little virtual environment. So there we go. That takes us into, this lovely file. So now that we have this .vnv file, it will be a good time to set up our .gitignore. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file as well. I'm going to make it called the .gitignore. And so this .gitignore file is made for like any Git version source control. In our case, right, Git repository connected to GitHub to let us know that we don't need to include this file. Why not? Virtual environments are local to my machine, right? So they contain, first of all, right, it's my setup for my device. They can't be shared across different operating systems or setups. And also they have a ton of files that would just clutter my repository. So in this case, I'm going to add my .vnv file into my gitignore like so. And then in this case, you might be asking, okay, but why would I already do that when I've just not set up my GitHub? And the important thing is that we want to avoid pushing this file entirely. If we push it, we'd have to remove it. And that's especially not a great strat if we were, it happened to contain any sensitive information, say something like an API key, all right, or, student sensitive data or whatever else, right? So setting up the gitignore before we even set up our Git repository is generally recommended. So now if I click this lovely little version control button, right, or source control button on the left-hand side, is my file explorer, my search, right, my run and debug, my extensions, some of my testings. But in here, I'm going to use the source control button, and I'm going to click on initialize repository. So this just went ahead and created a brand new Git repository for me. Now, what I have done ahead of time here, right, is I have, set up my Visual Studio Code to be connected to my GitHub account, so on and so forth, right? So that part will hopefully be a little bit more helpful. So now in here, I'm going to say, this is what we call my initial commit, right? Or my kind of initial to the repository. And now if we click here on this commit button, that would do like commit my changes up into my Git repository. But I also actually want to push them up, right? So the difference between a commit and a push, I'll spare you the details for now, unless somebody else is interested and has questions. Same with these, but in this case, I'm just going to combine these two actions into one. There would be different reasons in which case you might want to do one over the other, but in my case, you're going to do commit and push. And then I got a nice little warning up down here that I think you should be able to see. And it says your repository has no remotes configured to push to. And so what this is just telling you is that you don't have an actual remote, right, or a place that you're pushing to set up yet. And this is where github.com is going to come in. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how I set up a new repository, and we'll continue from there. So I'll share my screen here. We'll swap what I'm looking at, and I'll show you my GitHub setup right here. So this is my lovely GitHub repository, right? If I go into my profile, right, you can see all of my lovely things. You can see how I mostly at this point, with teaching being my full-time thing, contribute code during Global Hack Week. But we'll go ahead and enter into this repository section, and then we'll go ahead and start in here. We'll create our repository name. We'll call it Student Dashboard. And then in my description, we'll say made for GHW data, which is in February 26. And then student dashboard is a data visualizer for teachers made with Python. Right, so this is our quick, right, super specific version. For my visibility, I'm going to pick public, right, because I want you to do this. Start with a template. I'm not going to pick any template in my case. Add a README. I won't. Add a gitignore and add a license. I won't do any of these steps because I've already created a README and a gitignore in my case. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and press this create repository. One more thing. Let me pick my owner as myself. And I'm not going to choose to jumpstart my project with Copilot. The part that's important now is for me to set up my repository here. So it's telling me this quick setup if you've done this kind of thing before. Luckily for us, I can just copy this lovely link down here. And then if I go back to my Visual Studio Code, which would be right here, and then I click on Publish Branch, it's going to ask me to publish to repository, right? So repository name. I can go ahead and publish to GitHub. And then if I open it on GitHub, apparently I just remade it. It's some sort of craziness. Hold on. This is what happens when you change something from the way you normally set things up to try and learn menus. So I'm going to try git remote remove origin here. So I've removed my origin, and then now when it asks me to publish the branch, I want to push, I want to add a remote. Now I'll add in the link. Please provide a remote name. We'll just do that, our remote as origin. That tends to be the default. And then we'll go ahead and share that, and that should be much better. Okay, sweet. All right, lovely. So now if I go back to my GitHub and I refresh my page, I should in theory have things added, and I do not. So let me try that process again. So if I publish, okay, I published something. Let me refresh. Perfect. Okay, so now if we take a look at my web browser really quickly, I'll go ahead and show this to you. Share my screen here, do my window, and then go in here. And all I have is, of course, the 3 files that I've created, because the other folders I've made are empty. I, of course, don't have anything in there yet, so I don't have anything to, GitHub doesn't actually push up the folders until there's information inside. You've actually got great timing. So we just went ahead and talked a little bit about what we're going to be making over the next hour and a half, 2 hours or so. And then I went ahead and created our repository. You can now view the repository link still right below my face. I'm going to leave it up here for about a minute or two. And then once that is done, we'll go ahead and move on and then continue with our, or I'll remove it from the screen. We'll obviously continue with our stream from there. But generally, right, that is where you can grab the repo. So all that we did was we set up our project, added a git ignore, added a requirements.txt, set up our Python file. So you're pretty much ready to jump in with us if you are interested. And then let me go ahead and walk through the things that I want to do next. So we did our dependencies, right? And so our main idea behind our dependencies, right, is these libraries, lovely libraries in requirements.txt, are going to be the things that are responsible for doing some of our data processing, so doing some visualizations, and for actually creating the dashboard itself, right? So Streamlit is going to be what we'll actually use to code some of our dashboard. Now in here, what I'm going to do is I am going to import my data set. So I went ahead and asked for a data set to be generated for me right before this stream. And I went ahead and tested it out. I cannot see the commands you type in terminal because of the moving bar at the bottom. Let's just take it out, and hopefully that helps a little bit. And I'll also take off that MLH text down in the middle as well. So hopefully those 2 things help. I'm now going to install a CSV extension, and then we'll go from there. So in here, right, I've added a data file. This is entirely anonymous, right? Data file that has some student information. So in case you missed it, and I bring it up in pretty much every stream because it is a big part of my life after all. As yours truly, I am outside of, MLH and coaching and all the other things I've done for three years now. I also now teach high school computer science. And so I figure I pretty much approach every Global Hack Week with the idea of, okay, what project can I try to make within a couple of hours that will make my life at least a little bit easier? And so in the theme of data, I figured that we would create a nice little dashboard to display some information about students. So just to clarify, this is entirely like literally random information. I used an AI to generate me random students' names with assignments, right? And then I asked it to kind of do some cleanup of the data to make it a little bit more realistic. So I added student IDs that are a little bit, more messy. I added student names, first and last. These are entirely random. Each student belongs to one of my 6 classes that I teach, denoted by class period. Each student has an assignment that they've completed that has a name. For example, mini projects, right? The list or erase homework, function design homework, loops lab, code tracing quiz, data structure intro homework, right? Or, something in between. And each assignment also has a type, right? So like a category that it belongs to in the gradebook. If you are familiar with the U.S. education system, all of this sounds pretty familiar. If you are not, most of the time when we organize gradebooks, we assign different portions of the grade, like different assignments, different weights. So it'll be like, like your quizzes are worth 25% of your grade. Exams are worth 50% of your grade, right? And homeworks are worth, 5% of your grade or something similar, right? The actual percentages for this purpose don't matter. Hopefully that's a little bit better on the Zoom. But all right, the actual percentages for the purposes of this exercise don't really matter. It's just something to keep in mind. And then the assignment name, we talked about assignment type. We talked about date is just the calendar day on which the assignment will happen, right? If it has not happened already. For the purposes of this demo, I went ahead and had it generate random dates for what we call third quarter, at least where I teach, which is from the start of the start of the calendar year. So like early January until spring break, which in our case is in the middle of March. Then there is the score. And if a student did not submit an assignment, the score is left as empty. There is the max score, which is the amount of points that it can be out of. For example, this assignment is worth 50 points and the student scored a 39.0. And then whether the student submitted it, which is just a true if they did or a false if they did not, right? So this is the main idea behind the data set that I've generated. I'm going to go ahead and push this up into the GitHub repository. So I'm going to go ahead and put in here, added data set. I'll commit, push this up. So now everybody can go ahead and also view our random data set in case you are interested in following along, right? And working through our plans for the live stream. So that covers, right, this portion of our lovely section. And so I went through and talked through, some of the main things that we have in here. When I asked it to generate the data set, I set a couple of constraints in mind to keep it relatively realistic. A student will only have up to 1 assignment per day, right? So this isn't like they'll have, like 3 graded things, right? We're only looking at their performance in my class, right? My class. So in one class specifically that they take, right? I also tried to, make the assignment names relatively realistic, but I didn't get a chance to look through every single one. And I made sure that all the dates fell on weekdays. So I tried to cut out weekends just in case that messed with the data in any way, shape, or form. And so then in here, the important part is, right, this would be the sort of data that you would get from something like an export of Canvas or Schoology or Blackboard, insert LMS of your choice, right? What we call a learning management system. But we want to actually go through some of the process of cleaning up this data, right? So if we go into our source folder here, we're going to go ahead and create a new file. And I'm going to call this clean_data.py, right? So in here is where I'm going to go through and work on cleaning up some of my specific data. So there's a couple of things I want to clean up. And that's going to be the setting, like converting text to numbers, right? As needed, the date, right, from a date string into an actual date. And then also the score, right, as a score number that we create. So in here, I'm going to start by importing pandas as PD, and then I'm going to create a function called clean data that will take in our lovely little data set, right? So this is our file path, except in here, in here, we'll say our data file is, we're going to read our CSV of our file path, right? And then in here, instead of cleaning up this way, what I want to do is say for my score, I want to fill every score that I don't know with a 0. I don't know what I just clicked, fill NA, and then that's going to be just a 0. So what I'm saying here, right, and you can kind of hover over these definitions and see here, right? So fill NA, right? Also with GitHub Copilot, which I have set up in here, you can also Command I and then say, explain this line of code to me. Right. And then in here, right, it actually adds in a comment to explain the value. So it reads in a CSV file, replaces all the missing values in the score column with a 0, right? This is useful for analyzing data or creating a dashboard display. So great. Now in here, right, that creates our score. Then we'll also say that for our date column, right, I want to convert that date. And then for errors, right, I'm not 100% familiar with what errors coerce does. So let's go ahead and see if we can figure this out together. I can open up instead of, yep. So this is my chat. Explain. I want to ask. Explain what errors equals coerce does in this function. Right, so in here, so coerce, when the parameters serve to coerce any values, it cannot be converted to a valid date time will be replaced with not a time, which is a pandas equivalent for not a time, not of NaN for daytime objects. This prevents a function from raising an error if it encounters an invalid date format. Cool, that makes perfect sense to me. All right, cool. And then as well as in my max score, I'm going to make sure my max score should definitely not have any NAs. So I'm just going to do as type and then float. And then I will also do my class period. And I just want to make sure that's called class. It's class period. It is. So this is why, you know, you have to always trust anything that is sort of generated with a grain of salt. And then I don't need NA filled with unknown. I can assume, right? So there's a couple of things that we can assume about our data set, right? Because I created it, so I kind of know what we know about our data set. We don't have null values for max score, class period, date, or, you know, like student ID, student name, whatever else, right? every item that we've passed into the CSV is a valid item for us to display. Right, and then in here we have our clean data. Right, sets us up nicely for this option here. Right, so then in here, this lets us set up this lovely little section here. This is that. I have a couple of different things that I want to talk about in here. So I'm trying to think of, is there anything else that I want to grab before we move on? Let me make sure. I'm going to refer back to my machine plan here real quick. Okay. So in here, I'm just going to go ahead and also change my function import just slightly. And so in here, I'm going to go ahead and change just a couple of things. So I'm going to change my import here. I'm going to say that df is going to be a PD data frame that will return a PD data frame. And then instead of here, I'm going to just do df will be df.copy. All right, so I'll create a new copy of my data file, whatever I want to actually clean my data. Totally fine for the purposes of this exercise, of course. So then in here, right, that helps me get this nicely set up. What we'll go ahead and work on next is this is all our loading. All right, yep, exploring a data set. Yes, I know. Okay, cool. This is that. And then in here, cool. So this lets us kind of load and clean our data. But then what we'll go ahead and do next is we will add some features and get a student summary. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and push this up onto GitHub. So as always, what I'm going to do is added clean underscore data .py. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and press commit, push this up into the cloud, push this up into the cloud. Oh my God, push this up into GitHub. And so this way, right, depending on how you want to kind of follow along with the stream, you've kind of got lots of different options. If you want to code along, I would recommend that you create a local version of your repository, follow along with me. If you want to kind of, like more passively watch or get examples, right, feel free to watch me code and then go ahead and pull or fork or template or clone my most recent version of my GitHub repository, whatever you feel like works best for you. If you want constant access to my changes and updates, I would probably recommend a fork. If you want to start off from a point and then continue, I would probably do something like a template. Oh, sorry, I just turned around my dog to sleep. Very sweet. But generally, right, that's what I would recommend for kind of figuring out how to best interact with the stream in the way that works best for you. And so next, we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go into our source file. Or my goodness, our source folder. There we go. SRC, source, words are hard. And we're going to add in features and a quick kind of student summary. We'll also do some analytics. And then finally, we will build out our lovely little dashboard. And so let's start off by going and creating a nice little features.py file. So in my features.py file, this is where we're going to create like a summary for each student's information. This is also where we'll keep track of like their current percentage on an assignment, any missing assignments that they may have, and a summary of each student's specific work. As well as an individual student summary that we could create. So in here, we'll go ahead and create a first definition. Let me see. I want to make sure that I'm not missing here. I have so many different things that I've like tried out that I want to make sure that work great. So yeah, perfect. That makes sense. So then here, what we'll go ahead and do is we'll import pandas as PD, and then we'll create a def called add features. That'll create a data frame. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this real quick because I actually do want to write out our individual percentage scores. So, then we could do our data file. Will be data file.copy. I don't want all of this. I do want a data file percent, which will be score divided by max score multiplied by 100. And then I want a missing flag. So for DF is missing, that will be, let me put that in quotes, is missing. And then we will do data file. And this is kind of where you can see this messes up, right? Where data file submitted equals false, right? Where it's thinking that I'm looking for, right, null values in here because that's what I have in my max score here. But in reality, in my clean.py, I also go through the process of actually cleaning those up. So I don't have null values in there anymore. So that's also something important to keep in mind there. And then we return our data file. And then in here, we have our student summary as well. So lots of lovely things, clean data. Yeah. And then percent, this is clean data.py, features.py, percent is missing. And then we'll go ahead and return our data file, right? And always, we can always figure out how to add more features in here. Next one we're going to do is we're going to do get student summary. And so student summary will take it into my data file in here. And then student summary will create a group by student ID. So we'll create, say, summary, space equals space, df.group by. And you can kind of see how Copilot generates something that's quite there, but not maybe necessarily there. We'll do student ID and then student name and then class period. Hold on. All right, so this is that part and then aggregate in there. So group by, we want to group this by the list here. So we'll add in these lovely little parentheses. And then that looks better. So summary. And then dot aggregate. And then let's maybe try here, right? And then we'll do average percent. And then that'll be the average score here. And then the assignment count, or like the total assignments, right? And then finally our missing assignments. And then in here, we're also going to do a dot reset index. My goodness. And then in here, we'll go ahead and do as well. We'll keep track of what we call our at-risk students, right? So at-risks are students who are, well, in danger of failing, which is defined as any grade below a C at this time. So in that case, summary average score is less than or equal to 70 in my case, or they have more than 2 missing assignments. That's, I think, a great summary here. And then we'll go ahead and return summary in here. And then what we'll go ahead and do for our next portion is begin writing out some of our analytics, right? So these analytics are what we're going to actually use to keep track of specific class periods or do anything else. Well, welcome on in. There is a repository linked earlier up with the code that you might have missed. I'll go ahead and update it with just a second with all of the things I've just added into features.py. But once we finish up with that, no, I don't want to make a new repository. Go to my projects. Hold on, repositories. Perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and share the link to you for my student dashboard. If you want to go ahead and grab that, you can also, when you join in, right, scan the QR code on the top right-hand side to make sure you get your swag points, and check in as well. And then let's go ahead and continue on here. I'll go ahead and update this. I'll say added features.py, commit it, push it up, right? And that change will be automatically linked to my lovely GitHub window. There we go. That's better. Sorry, I was showing my screen there for a second. But lovely. So we have features.py set up. Our next step is going to be to set up analytics, right? So that's going to be things like how is each class doing? How is each individual student doing? So on and so forth. And so in here, what we'll go ahead and start is we'll do a new source, and then we'll create a new file. We'll call this analytics.py, right? And then we'll go ahead and start in here. We'll import pandas as PD, and then we'll say, great. No, dog's so cute. Anyway, so let's see in here. This features.py, analytics.py, cool. And then so we'll start by creating an analytics for my class performance, which will take in a data frame. And then in here, we'll do our grouping by class period and percent, right? And it is class underscore period. And then percent. So we'll do class period. Hold on. Class period. And then in here, we could also do percent. But we could also try to see if we could maybe potentially try to return performance here. With the student at risk and a student ID. I'm interested to see how this will show up, actually. So I'm going to leave this recommended version. From GitHub Copilot, I want to see how this actually works. So I'm going to also add a comment for myself that says to do. This Python different comment. Where is it? To do verify updated analytics code works with dashboard. Right, so in this way I have a little comment telling me to maybe go back and give this a once over if I have some errors. And then in here, right, my class performance, I will also create an assignment performance, which will be similar. In this case, I group by assignment ID. Right, let me just make sure that if I go to my data, it is assignment type, yes. And then in here, right, let me double check what I've got here and then decide what to do from there. I've got to see these, yep. Now me thinking right now. Yeah. And then my class. So this would be, I wonder now if actually I don't want to try here. Let me try that. Uh-huh. Get to a summary. And then, but I already have, okay, no, so yeah, that would be analytics.py. That's what I thought. Okay, and then we've got, right, group by class period. And then class period trends. And then, yes, then I have the class performance. And then in here, what we'll go ahead and do next is try to sort of set up our dashboard. So if we start with our dashboard in here, what we're going to do now is begin to kind of lay out our dashboard. So we've got all of the other files set up, right, to kind of get us started. And then in here, and then we'll go ahead and push up these. So added analytics.py, right? Let me commit this and we'll see how this works. I'm actually going to delete this one random space, push this up, commit. Oh, oops. I always hate when I do this. Removed white space and then commit, push. There we go. All right, sweet. So that lets us get started onto this point right here. We're going to probably end up spending the rest of our time building out our lovely little dashboard. So with our lovely little dashboard, let's create a new file. Not in source, actually, it's going to go right outside of it. But I think as a good kind of midpoint break-ish, right now would be a good time to maybe see if we can generate a nice little readme.md file. So I want to generate code. Let's see if we can ask GitHub Copilot here to generate a nice readme.md file for me to include in this GitHub repository. Include information for people interested in following in, you know what, we'll just start with that. We'll see what it comes up with. And then we'll see what we can create here. Sure. And so we'll collect some worst case information. It's just, so the data includes yes. So I want to create, we'll see how this does, a readme.md file that generates or that describes this repository. You can use other readme files you know as inspiration. Let's start with that. So write the markdown for the readme file. I might be in ask mode. So let's do, if we can do plan mode. That's much better. Then in here, it looks like I have something. Perfect. So this is the actual README that I've generated, right? So you're in dashboard. Okay, cool. Scripts for data cleaning, feature engineering, and analytics, as well as a data set of student assignments. test data set for student assignments. This repository was created for Global Hack Week data in February 2026. It is intended to be used for educational purposes. This project welcomes suggestions for improvements. All right, and then in here, data set, installation, and then usage, and then acknowledgements. Sure, I guess it's under the MD license or MIT license, and then we'll remove acknowledgements, and then I'll go ahead and grab this lovely section of code. We'll drop it into readme.md, and that should be it for the actual file, right? So in here, right, this is doable. We'll go ahead and close this chat out, delete this, so don't save, and then create this as added GitHub Copilot readme.md. Great, so we'll go ahead and commit this, push this up, and that is the end. So nice and beautiful little readme, enough to get us through and at least have somebody, be able to contribute and see some additional options. So now I feel like we need to add a license file. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. And then I'm going to create a new file. That'll be the license. And then choose a license template. I'm going to grab the MIT license, review and submit. Great. And then I'll commit changes and then say add MIT license to the project. I just go ahead and did that on the web. GitHub has built-in sources to go ahead and do that part. But then what I want to do is I want to pull in the license. Great. So now if I pull down, you'll see I already have my license file in here. So great. That is already done. Then let's go ahead and continue onwards with our lovely dashboard. So in here, we're going to create a new file. I'm going to call it dashboard.py. And this will be kind of the bread and butter of our actual web page, right? This is what will showcase all of our information, right? And all of this lovely data analytics that we've managed to accomplish over the last like hour or so, right? So we'll do a couple imports to start. We'll do import Streamlit as ST. We'll import pandas as PD, and then import plotly.express as PX. Cool. And then we'll also do our import modules. So here we'll do from src dot clean data. We'll import clean data from src dot features. We'll import create. We'll import add features and get student summary. Cool. And then from src.analytics, we will import our class performance and our assignment performance. Cool. And so these cover these lovely little imports in here, right? We're getting warnings right now because they haven't been used. This makes sense, right? They're grayed out, not accessed, pretty standard stuff there. So then let's go ahead and try to actually build out this lovely repository. And so then in here, I'm going to do st.set page config, and then we're going to set up a page title and a layout. So in here, I'll set this up this way and then get it nice and set here. And then let me just go ahead and make sure. I think this is great. So now in theory, if I exit out here, I should be able to run my lovely project. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and grab something. So in theory, I should now be able to run my Streamlit app. So we'll start with that. And so I have Control-C hit, and that'll be, okay, cool. So let me try Streamlit run dashboard.py. Or I literally just looked at the command and then I lost it. Let me try again. It is Streamlit run dashboard.py. Weird. Let me just try to run it from here. And then perfect. Okay. So now you can see on my lovely screen that we actually managed to get that one to work. So the nice part here, right, is that we just literally have a blank Streamlit app right now. And nothing has pretty much been added or happened on it. Right. We just did our lovely little wide layout and we gave it a page title. And then in here, what we'll do is we will start by loading and preparing our data. So we'll add this cache data, we'll load data. And in this case, we're just going to go ahead and load in my data set from here. We'll clean it, add features, and then here we'll go ahead and run load data, and then we'll try to get our student summary. So now if I refresh my Streamlit page, all right, now I'm getting an error, which is to be expected. I'll show you what the error is. Python interpreter was running. Yeah, I will exit out of it in a second. But in here, right, we'll go ahead and see we've got in Streamlit, right, exec function key error, right? So then it's telling me list calls do not exist, right? Apparently column assignment ID do not exist. All right, so let's take a look at our code in here and see where we might stumble into this assignment ID. So let's go back into here, analytics.py, and we'll go ahead and start with assignment underscore ID. All right, so it looks like assignment ID comes up in analytics.py and features.py. And so I might have to go back to my, in here, it's assignment type. Perfect. See, this is why we need to be careful whenever we add in our code. So we'll go back to assignment ID, and then we'll click in here. We just want to set this to assignment type. And then in features.py, use assignment type as well, right? And so now if we look for assignment type, we should see a couple more options. And then we'll go ahead and start by running this guy again. So let's stop and then Streamlit run my dashboard. Alrighty, we are back to no errors, right? Although nothing is showing on our web page yet, but that should be totally fine. Right, at the very least, we have something in here, right? So we have our data loading. We're not getting an error. Let's go ahead and push this up in here. So we'll say debugging name errors and changing. Debugging name mismatch and adding dashboard setup. Cool. So that actually starts and launches our initial dashboard. We'll push this up, gets us in a solid spot here. I'll also go ahead and here just type an exit. Oh my goodness. There we go. Sweet. We'll go ahead and close the Python interpreter there. And then from here, there's a couple of things we can go ahead and do, right? So let me check on here. Give me 1 minute. This is fine. Cool. All right. So we've got our student data, our features, our dashboard analytics. We should be able to actually begin and get something to show up on our dashboard. If we can continue on here. And so I'm going to say in here, this will be our student performance dashboard. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a header key here called class performance overview. And so now if I were to go ahead and go to my local host, right, you should be able to see the student performance and the class performance overview. I'm going to go ahead and share that really quickly so you can go ahead and see it. All right, so those two sections of text I added, right? Student performance dashboard, class performance overview, right? Looks great so far. Nice, easy start to getting our actual setup. Now, if we go ahead and go back to VS Code, we'll be able to go ahead and continue from here, right? So then, as we'll go ahead and create this lovely section, we will start off our lovely little column, right? So in here, we'll go ahead and start with call 1, call 2, and call 3. No, not complexity. Call 3. It's going to be ST columns. And then call 1.metric is going to be the total students. And then that will be in here. Student summary dot shape. Right, and then 0 here. So we're saying, hey, right, get me the dimensions of that frame. And then column 2 dot metric, we'll do average score. And then that's going to be student summary dot average score dot mean percent to F. And then at risk students are going to be the total number of students that we have at risk. And so now in here, if we go ahead and refresh my Streamlit page, we will go ahead and see some information about specific students. So if we go ahead and flip through that, share my screen here, you'll see my total students, right, is 72. My average score is 75.52%, and I have 14 students that would be considered at risk based on the criteria we set aside earlier, right? So then as we go back to VS Code, it's going to be a lot of flipping back and forth over the next little bit. So keep that in mind as you kind of bear patience with me. But let's go ahead and say dashboard display setup. That will be, I think, a good starting point here. We can commit this, push this up to the cloud. And that should cover our kind of main section here. Let me make sure I keep sharing my screen here because I'm going to always forget to flip-flop back and forth here between those two. But at the very least, now that we have this set up, we're at a pretty good spot to, kind of double check where we're at, make sure we're in a good, okay spot, and so on and so forth. So now what we want to do is in here, we're going to create our individual student section. So I'm just going to go ahead and put our individual student performance here. So in here, we'll be able to select one student and kind of see our information about them, right? So we're going to start with individual student performance. And then for our student, we're going to say select, right? No. Select student ID. Oh my God. Hold on. What am I looking at? Yeah. Okay. Select box, select student. And then student name. And then for my student summary, I want to, instead of doing student ID, I'll do student summary dot sort underscore values, right? We'll do with student name and then student name dot unique, right? So we don't want to keep any duplicate records in here. For the purposes of this, right, exercise, of course, we know that we don't have a student with the same first and last name as another student, which you'd be surprised how often that happens and is an absolute massive headache to deal with. But in this case, we don't really have to worry about it. We can just assume that each student that shows up is, well, one student and they only have one name. Well, there's only one student with that name, not that they only have one name. There we go. Words are hard. And then in here, we'll create our student data file. And we will say that's going to be our data file right? For data file, student name is student. And then for our student's class period, that's going to be just the student class period at that specific thing. And we'll also convert it to a number, right? Because we know that their class period is an integer, as we established 1 through 6. And then we'll do st.write, and then we'll do class period is student period, like that. So now if I refresh again, we'll go ahead and hop in here, and we should be able to see a drop down of all my students, and then a list of all additional items from there. So now if I refresh the page, great. I have individual students. They're listed in alphabetical order by first name, right? I can click on them and they'll tell me that what class they belong to, right? So Emma Anderson's in 6th period, Emma Lopez is in 5th, Ava Lopez is in 5th, Amelia is in 3rd, right? Henry's in 5th, and I don't know, Scarlett is in 4th. Great. All right, so that part covers that. Let's go ahead and keep going with kind of creating our visualizer, right, and work through what other sort of useful information we might want to display. So then in here, I am really proud of this idea that I had for the scatter plot with a trend line. So we're going to do in here a couple of things. We'll have to sort by the date for trends, and then we'll also have to create the oh my god, sorry, words are hard. We'll also have to create the we'll also have to create the actual graph. So we're going to say for student._df, we're going to sort these values by date. So student_df dot sort values, and then I'm going to sort by date. And then in here, I'm going to say student_df, and then I'm going to create a new section called rolling average. And then that's going to be the percent. And then rolling is their, for the last 3 assignments, what is their average, right? So that will cover that portion of, well, my graph. And then for my actual graph is I'm going to create a scatter plot with a trend line that also differentiates assignment type and uses my assignment average. Okay. And then also we'll actually like update the layout of it and plotify it, and it's going to be beautiful. So in here, we're going to create a figure for student, and that's going to create a scatter plot. So we're going to do scatter. And in that scatter, right, we'll have to add in a bunch of information. So we'll say student_df, right, be our first portion. Then we'll do X is date, Y is percent, colors assignment type, symbol will also be assignment type. Right, and then title, and then let's do hover data will be score. So we could also do assignment name. So I have to go to my data set and confirm these are what I call them. Assignment name, yes. Good. So then we'll do assignment name. Score, max score is missing. I think that is fine. I don't think I want any of these. Otherwise, score, max score is missing. I don't think I want max score in here. And I don't really care much about the is missing either, because, well, if it's missing, then they get a 0. So we'll just do assignment name as score. Or actually, we'll do percent instead of score. And then in here, right, so that we can just display their percentage. And then the title is going to be performance of student over time. And then the labels are going to be date is date, and then percent is score. All right, so that covers our lovely little plot in here. We need a semicolon or a comma there, and that should work through that process. And then we'll actually want to do the scatter. So we'll do figure, right? That's what the fig stands for. Fig underscore student dot add scatter. And then in that add scatter, we'll have to do a couple of things. We'll say X is student.datafile_date, Y is student.datafile rolling average, mode is lines, and then the name is the rolling average for the 3 assignments. And then my line is going to be color white dash sure. And maybe I'll set a width as well of 2. Great. And then in here, then we'll also do an update. So that will be fig underscore student update layout. And then we'll do y-axis is a dictionary of a range. It goes from 0 to 100. I'm going to do -5 to 105 to cover the zeros that it looks like you actually have them. We're also going to make sure that this gets a closing parenthesis. And then we'll say x-axis title is date, y-axis title is score percentage, legend title is assignment type. And then that should cover it. And then in here, we'll try to plot. And let's go ahead and take a look at our Streamlit and see what we've just made, our lovely little setup. I mean, I know what's happening for the most part. There's like 2 stylistic changes I've made, but I'm excited to show y'all what it looks like. So let's refresh the page. And ta-da! Ooh, very fun, right? So you can see, right, what library is this? So in this case, right, we're using a combo of Plotly Express and Streamlit, right? So we're mostly using Plotly to actually showcase, right, or to actually build out this graph, and then Streamlit to build out the web page, right? So we've got our lovely little performance over time, right? Let's see if I click on Benjamin, right? Benjamin has different data. So Benjamin will show me some different information. Right, so we've got assignment type, date, score, so on and so forth. Right, so we can see a little bit about how Benjamin is doing. And so much about telling me there's only 1 project. Benjamin apparently gets 2 grades for literally everything. So that's fun, I guess. And then, yeah, you got something like Elijah, which is a little bit more consistent, right? And then maybe potentially some students who tend to flip-flop a little bit more, right? And then also, right, things like Emma Smith and so on and so forth. Mia, or maybe Liam here, right? So you've got a couple of different options here for actually laying out our graph. I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the dash here. So I'm going to go back to our code. And I'm going to remove the dash on the line. I'll leave the white color and change the width into 2. And then that will hopefully, we'll see how it looks on the actual graph. No, I like the dash line better. Never mind. Thank you. But yeah, I like the idea of like being able to graph it with a library and like actually being able to see all the data. It's pretty cool. And the fact that what I really like about Streamlit is the fact that like, you can literally like build out a fully functional, not me moving, and then everything getting, oh my goodness, hello. Oh, you came for pets? Yeah, you did. Hey, buddy. Sorry, my dog's under here. Oh, there we go. Big shake. Anyway, as I was saying, right, the cool thing behind this, like using Python here, is that we can really build out like a visualization, right? And something really hype in just a couple of hours. Really, it's only been about 90 minutes here, right? And we already have something that looks pretty impressive, right? And we've got more to add. And so then in here, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add some analysis for each class period. And then, oh my goodness. And then we'll go ahead and show off that. And then we'll see where we're at. And then we can decide where to go from there. So now in here, I'm going to go ahead and create, oh my goodness. And then, so then I'm going to create a header. And then I'll do class performance by period. And then I'm going to create a bar chart. right, where I get my average class period and then my average score. In this case, I'm going to actually stick with percent. And then I'll have a title, average score by class period. We'll do performance. And then in here, right, we have labels of class period and percent is average score. And then in here, right, we can also try to plot this chart, and I'll show off what that looks like in just a second. So now if I change this lovely screen, share my screen here, go to my student performance graph, and refresh my page, right, we can see class performance. Aha, columns at risk do not exist. So let's see here. Wow, we can go ahead and fix this lovely error. So columns at risk do not exist. Let's see, at score risk. There is no at-risk column. You are in fact correct. But you should already know whether a student is at risk. So let me see if I can go ahead and I'm going to click on this ChatGPT button for fun. And then I'll go ahead and close this out. In here, let me close this out there. And then I want to see what this comes up with. So they're saying before calling class performance df, run print df columns. Okay. So let me go ahead and try that. Cool. So we're still getting that error down there, but it's Let's see. So data. So you need to add it before calling class performance. That should be doable. So then in here, I could just also run that and try this in here. And then let's try to run the Streamlit now that I've removed references of it. Expected one of class period average score and total students, but received percent. Then that will be average score. That makes sense. All right, let's refresh the page now. See what we get here. Aha, perfect. So we get each class period, right, listed out in a nice, lovely graph. And that covers that lovely section of this portion, which is pretty nice, right? Gets me zoom out, zoom in, pans, zooms, downloaded plot as a PNG, right? Full screen options as well, because we are on Streamlit. What I think I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and think through how I want to customize this. So I'm actually going to chat here, and I'm going to try with the edit option. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to say, or actually customize my graph so it looks nicer by using a different color for each class. Oh, you can't see my VS Code. Hold on. My bad. Close that. Share screen. Open up here. Ta-da-da-da-da, ta-da-da-da, ta-da-da-da. We can open up dashboard.py. Let's run this through, see what we get. I'm curious to see what it can accomplish here. And then, so we'll try to do a discrete color sequence. I want to see what this looks like before I decide on whether to keep it or not. Ooh, that's kind of fun. I'll show you what it looks like on here. And I think it's cool. I like it. I think it's worth keeping. It alternates the colors from dark blue to white for each class period. So you can kind of see, right, the classes in each individual order, which is pretty nice. I think this is a nice little addition, so I don't see a reason to not keep it. And then let's go ahead and continue onwards, right, with our chart from here, right, and kind of what we can accomplish next. And then, so this is our average performance by class period. Right. I'm also going to create our class performance over time next, right? So that'll be our next graph that we sort of create. And then from there, we'll be able to move on and probably work slowly but surely towards wrapping up for the night. Or for the morning. I don't know where you are. Or for the afternoon. You know, you never know. And then so in here, what we're going to do is I'm then going to create a class period trend and then an assignment type performance as well. So we'll do trend .df will be our class. I don't have a class period trend. Let me look at this. I might need to go back and look in here. I've got some class. Okay. Performance. Okay, cool. So that would be class period performance and class period trend. Okay. So this would be our class period performance, which is just our class performance according to analytics.py. So then it will be the class performance of our data file, and then our fig trend is no, this is class performance. This is what I already have up here. So no, would be our class period. Yeah, our class trend. Okay. So then this means I need to go ahead and add in here another definition of what I was missing. So this would be class trends, right? And so I do have the class period trend in here. So this would be db.glue by date class period percent mean reset index. Cool. And then return trends. That is totally fine. And then so now if I go to dashboard.py, I'll need to import class performance, assignment performance, and class trends. And then in here is where I'll use class trends to actually write the specific function. Could you show the code? I have been showing it for a while. I think I should be good. I don't know. You wouldn't be able to see it? I think you should be able to. Right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then in here, if we start off, right, by grabbing my class period trend, I knew there was something I was missing. Cool. Then we'll do trend data file will be class trends, and then we'll do our line, right, where we graph our date, our average score. Each class period gets a color, and then we get our class performance trends over time. And then I will also use our discrete sequence as well here. And then we've got our class performance trends over time, and then label class period, class period. Okay, cool. And then update layout. Cool. Date, average score, class period, and then graph that as well. So let's see how that shakes out. So we'll go ahead and take a look at refreshing my page here, and perfect. And I'll show you what this looks like on here. So if I share this screen, you should be able to take a look at our lovely class performance trends over time, right? So you can see how each class's performance differs on average according to each day, right? So you can pick out individual trends within here for whatever reason, right? So in this case, we have our grades from 0 to 100. You can see that on March 5th, the average score of second period was 87. The average score of 6 was 84, and the average score of third was 76, and the average score of fifth was 56.17. So fifth period's not doing so hot, right? Whereas your seventh period is, your second period is pretty much crushing it, right? So you can kind of look into this for additional details or trends or something similar, right? And then you can always also pick an individual student in here as well. So that covers this next portion up in here. And then let's go ahead and, so this is our class performance over time. We could also do our assignment performance by type. And then we'll do a table of, we'll skip the table of at-risk students. I'll probably leave that for tomorrow's stream. And then we'll do our raw data with our expandable view after that. So in here, let's go ahead and create a new performance. So ST header will be assignment performance by type. And then we'll go ahead and run assignment performance, right? Do the bar graph, assignment type, average score performance by assignment type. Then we can go ahead and see what this chart actually looks like, right? So if I refresh the page here, and I show you the bottom of my code here, right? You can see average performance by homeworks, labs, projects, and quizzes. And you get a nice little lovely graph with 4 different colors, which is quite nice. And so these get a nice little like color, color definition as well, which is pretty great. So these are a good option as well for, like looking at any specific data or information. So this is looking really solid so far. Let's see if we can get our raw data set up, and then we'll go ahead and share my lovely, then we'll go ahead and share, make sure everything's posted up on GitHub, kind of talk about what's coming up for part 2, and probably end the stream maybe a couple minutes early. I want to make sure that we have, well, for part 2, I'm sure we'll keep plenty busy. I'm not worried about that, but more so just making sure that we're at a good stopping point before we begin the next portion. So I don't want to get into at-risk students because we were having some issues with that earlier. So and then in here, I want to do our Shara data, and that's just going to be a data frame. So that literally covers the remainder of this section of code. So now if I go close this out, share my screen, upload into my Streamlit file, refresh the page here, we should be able to, at the very end, see our raw student data, and then that will have in there. Great question. Can we clone the repo and follow along for part 2? Absolutely. So the repo will stay live. If you want to start off with part 2, kind of what I already have with part 1, I totally recommend it. If you want to, get yourself caught up while watching back or something similar, totally fine. But I understand we're busy people, and so you might want to have part 2 at the very least to look back at instead of, like waiting for me to scroll through and pushing that sort of information on there. So I would recommend that as a general piece of advice. Do you have any YouTube channel where you teach? Mostly at this point on the MLH, like YouTube. You can find, videos of me streaming and teaching Global Hack Week workshops that are almost 3 years old at this point. I've definitely gotten better at it, especially as, I now have formal teaching experience. But feel free to watch back if you especially want to see like some ancient Kari lore. That's totally up there. And, never say never. We'll see if I spin up enough interest to eventually end up teaching on the side or doing an online sort of teaching thing, but we'll see how that works out and how that shakes out. I'm actually going to also add a header right below this section here. I'm going to close out here and then share this screen. I'll show you dashboard.py really quickly. I want to add in here. We'll just do show raw data or raw student data in here. So that covers, the extent of my lovely visualization here. I'll go ahead and say this is part 1 completed up onto GitHub. We'll commit that and push it up. We note that our lovely portion so far is working, so that looks pretty great. We'll go ahead and double check for any polls. I don't know why there would be any because I'm the only one who runs this repository, but you never know. Is this all Python? So far, yes. Literally all Python. We might end up wanting to add some more stuff tomorrow, but that wasn't what I initially had planned, to be honest. We kind of speed ran my plan, and I will have to come up with what other fun things we can add in for part 2. But the benefit is that we can always go ahead and add in through a bunch of stuff and continue on from here. So perfect, right? We have our installation, right? Our data set, our actual overview. Cool. I didn't know Python could do all this. It's mostly the libraries that we built in. So like building out that that dashboard and that interface, that's all Streamlit. And then the graphs are mostly Plotly Express. And so that's been, kind of fun to mess around with and experiment with. And the graphs look pretty. And, sometimes that's what matters. In here, if you take a look, right, you'll see part 1 completed. There's a commit from a minute ago that has all of my lovely information. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this part with the usage because that is just straight up wrong. This is what happens when you try to ask AI to write you a README and then you don't read it over closely enough. But the student dashboard is Python-based courses. This doesn't have to be limited to computer science. Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh my goodness. All right, sweet. So we've got a ton of different things in here, right? Let me commit this change. So I will say removed usage due to errors. And then we'll commit this. We got a question here, how to get ideas to make a dashboard like trendy ones to showcase or make them for people. I think the general idea is, and this is what I always recommend for people that are looking for personal projects, side projects, things to work on, and anything like that. I like to think of like a problem that you are experiencing, because in reality, if you are experiencing a problem, chances are there's a wide variety of other people who are going to experience that problem or a similar problem at some point. Right. So if you want to do I could see a ton of stuff for individual sleep analytics, right? Like you could, keep track of your hours of sleep, or I feel like that's really kind of popping off recently. And I don't know about you, but I struggle getting enough sleep every single night. And so I feel like that is a generally positive thing they could always look into. Also pretty easy to gather data. You could also figure out how to incorporate an API into that, right? So doing something with instead of grabbing a CSV file of sleep data for an individual or whatever, right? Seeing if you can incorporate with the Garmin API or the Apple Watch API or something similar, right? To actually pull those, or the health kit, right? Or to actually pull those analytics. I think that would be really cool. That I think would go into the make them for people's option, right? That's really all that a lot of those. Oh my goodness, my dog is asleep on his bed sideways, but he is half off the bed. It's very sweet. But that's what I would personally recommend for looking ideas around you, right? What are problems that you're experiencing in your day-to-day life, right? What are issues that you're having in some way, shape, or form, right? Do you need, do you need to get more sleep? Do you want to track your exercise? Do you want to track the amount of time you're spending with your dog? do you want to track the amount of time you're spending driving to work, or the amount of time you're spending on Reddit, or like whatever else that happens to be exciting to you that you feel like you can dedicate the time to build it out into a project? That's really going to be your best benefit. Right? I think a project that you finish is better than a project that you don't, no matter how ambitious either one of those is, right? I think there's such a big benefit in completing projects, right? And actually seeing them through start to finish. So whatever personal or fun project idea you have, I think the main question you have to ask yourself before you embark on it is, how long is this going to keep me interested, right? At least for me, that was always a big deciding point between like which projects from, like hackathons I went to or events I did or something like that, which ones died when the event was over and which ones actually continued on for a little bit. And it came down to like, my social like my little heart for, and my joy in, helping people make a better world, and improve things and etc. And then also from there, right, realizing, how to make a project that's also fun for me to build, right? Because a project, if it's not fun for me to build, I'm not going to enjoy building it. And that's going to be annoying for everybody. So keep that in mind as well when you decide. I think this is probably a pretty solid segue for me to officially end off and say, if you have any questions, now would be the time to speak. Otherwise, you'll have to wait for 1 whole hours until you can ask me questions again, because I will be back tomorrow for part 2 of Data to Dashboard. More exciting stuff coming up. Exactly what, stay tuned. We'll find out together. I'm kidding. I'm going to come up with more things for us to work on. We just sped through my little stream plan, which is totally okay. What we'll go ahead and continue on from there, though, is we'll definitely look into some of those at-risk student metrics and how we can best add on to those. We will also take a look at, just more things to add into our app, potentially some integrations, potentially some messing around with the Campus API. Where did you find the data? I made it. I asked ChatGPT earlier when I was planning my stream to generate for me a fake list of students with fake data. And then it came up with like math classes and like science work. And I was like, no, I don't want to keep track of all of a student's work. I want to think about it from a teacher view. And then I gave it some other more specific prompts. It generated a data set that I was like, good enough. And then that is what I stuck in. I didn't want to use any pre-baked Kaggle or anything like that, just mainly for learning purposes here. And then that was kind of the main part. And then where's the repository? I went ahead and linked it in the chat. It is also below my face. And so you can go ahead and take a look at it. Feel free to star it, fork it, like it, or watch it, whatever the equivalent of that is on GitHub. If you enjoyed the stream, or you're looking to get updates, or you end up having to miss tomorrow or something similar. So keep that in mind, whatever you might happen to need there. That is what I would personally recommend doing to make sure that you are ready and set and all caught up. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and bring back our lovely little feedback link. So right below my face again, and coming to a comment section near you. What is error course? I talked about it, I think, before you got here, Sophie, but it's just telling you that if you get an error, to just force it to give it a value that doesn't make, right? Is effectively like a fancier null, so that you don't run into an error, right, that you can't resolve while you're actually reading and cleaning up the data file. For the purposes of this activity, we don't actually have any errors in the data set. Right, there's no actual errors in the data set. So that's kind of how we accommodate for that. But on this note, Global Hack Week feedback, right below my face, also posted in the chat. If you enjoyed my stream, you had a great time. You had a wonderful, wonderful time hanging out with me. Thank you, Avocode Learner, for jumping in and explaining that even a little bit further. But right, if you enjoyed it, you had a great time. Awesome. I'm happy you're here. I thoroughly enjoyed hanging out with you for a little bit. If you are interested in more streams in general, I have a whole gambit of Global Hack Week streams coming up over the next couple of days. And by I mean mostly our lovely team. But you are here in Data Dashboard Part 1. And then we've got Getting Good with Git, or Get Good with Git, coming up at 10 a.m. here, which will be a really fun one, I think. Lets you dive in and get a bunch of stuff lovely and done. Well, then we've got today Global Hack Week, right? Aching off day 5. Chat votes on Ryan's hack. Oh, this is so fun. Well, I know what I would tune into if I wasn't at work. Tune in to see Ryan at 12 p.m. Central or 1 p.m. Eastern time, or whatever time zone you are in with you, to see Ryan build out a project live using the Gemini CLI. And then we also have, looks like, an intro to production engineering. You have me again at 4 p.m. Central time, 5 p.m. Eastern. Insert whatever time zone you happen to be in time. Data structures and algorithms, and then MCP Silver's with MongoDB. So I would love to see this if I was you. So I would see if you could go ahead and tune in and watch this lovely live stream with Ryan. And otherwise, if you get a chance to, tune in to our Get Good with Git stream, or today in Global Hack Week, or anything and everything in between, we would always love to see you. And make sure that you come and say hi and tell them Corey sent you. If Corey did actually send you. Last but certainly not least, if you did not yet get a chance to check in, there we go, it's the other way. Over there, right, kind of in that direction, is a nice little QR code that has the check-in information for this event. So if you want to get your swag points, all of your detail, and then all of your information and all of that, right, that's how you get that. And I am going to stay on for a couple more minutes to answer questions. I already see one in the chat. I will figure it out and see if I can find out the answer for you. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow. It was lovely to hang out with y'all. And let me see if I can get you Avid Co-Learner before I head off that one answer. Do you have knowledge of the MLH challenges of NVIDIA and Google Dev? How do you submit that? Yes. So usually if you go to gbhw.mlh.io, then you go to challenges, and you click on the actual challenge. You should be able to authenticate with my MLH here. And I'm just going to check mine to make sure that it works first. Oh, I got an email. All right, so there's my one-time code to sign into my account. Great, continue. Yes, so if you go to mlh.com/challenges or participate Global Hack Week data challenges, there we go. Sweet. And then you take a look at the actual list of challenges on this link. I'm going to go ahead and send it over. And then in here, if you take a look at that, right, you've got your golden ticket challenge, or whatever other challenge you might be participating in, right? Like MongoDBs, or make a video about Global Hack Week, or Bias Hunter, and so on and so forth, right? Whatever you might happen to have, right? That's kind of where you want to like pop in and start off at. So in here, right, if you look at that challenge, then you click on that submit your project button. It has you upload screenshots of your submission and then enters a description of your project. Looks like all you need to do qualify is, right, complete your entry form. And then there's also looks like an entry form linked there. And then also completing one of the Google Cloud and NVIDIA learning pathways. So I would just make sure that you read over that whole section, complete all of those steps, and then go from there. Well, it looks like they're asking for a description of your project, right? So I would go ahead and make sure like either your right? Like either your proof of your learning path, right? Or maybe what projects you've made based on the things you've learned, right? And then also your actual entrance form as well, and whatever you might have added on there. So that's what I would recommend personally uploading. Of course, I'm not the person that actually is running the challenge, so maybe consider reaching out and double checking. But I would make sure of that as well. Well, there's other requirements for that challenge that need to be completed in addition to that pathway, right? Just by reading it over, it looks like you also need to post on social media or a blog about what you learned and how you apply it to your next project. Tag Google on LinkedIn and or X, right? Mention Google for Developers, include the hashtag, and then complete your entry form. And then check out the complete terms and conditions. And then I would make sure that you also submit it onto MLH as well. So either like a screenshot of the pathway or, a screenshot of your tweet or something similar, or a screenshot of the completed form, all three, I think couldn't hurt in this case. So I would just make sure that you have enough that a team member who's reviewing it can have a chance to take a look at it. Where can one expect to receive swag if you are located in the US? Should be, usually we try to ship them out within a couple of weeks. Plus, like standard shipping processing time. After Global Hack Week wraps up, right? We accumulate the points. We figure out who needs to get shipped to. We make sure you have an updated address on file. We send them out in batches. You'll probably receive additional details as you figure that out. So it should be a couple weeks, hopefully not much longer than that. But it can vary. Like, for example, last month, half the country got iced, snowed, blobbed. So in that sort of situation, shipping might take longer. I'm still waiting on something that was shipped at the end of January, and I'm really annoyed. At that point, I think you'll have to direct your questions elsewhere, because that's the extent of what I can figure out on that form. From what it seems like, you have to complete that entry form in order to even be eligible. So I would look in and see and explore that FAQ a little bit further and read those terms and conditions. Alrighty. If there are not any other questions, I'll go ahead and head out for the evening. In my case, maybe morning and afternoon for yours. And I will see all of you tomorrow around the same time, an hour early, actually, where we'll go ahead and delve into part 2. And so I think that'll be really fun. I'm excited for it. I hope you're excited for it. I will see you all on the next one. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and head out. Bye, everybody.